Death Takes a Fall, a Cotswold Crimes Mystery by Sharon Lynn. Narrated by Ellie Gossage. Chapter 1. The First Discovery. Dew glistened on the round English wild blackberry dangling tantalizingly over the cliff. I reached for it. Planting my feet, I calculated the distance, and if I stood on my toes, the reward would be mine, sweet and delicious. As my fingers cradled the fruit, the gravel shifted. The toe of my hiking shoe caught as I overcorrected and tipped over the precipice. Flailing, I crushed the blackberry, juice squirting onto my face. My other hand gripped the closest vine, sharp thorns tearing my skin.
"Maddie?"
Edward's voice barked my name as I slammed into a ledge. His head popped over the side of the cliff above, brown eyes searching for me.
"Madeline!"
He looked horrified, and then he schooled his features to neutral.
"Is that blood?"
To his credit, he said it calmly. Dabbing my finger in the goo oozing across my face, I probed. No pain, so I tasted it. "Blackberries," I announced. "I had no idea England was so steep," I added. Hailing from the Arizona desert, I pictured a hike in the Cotswolds as gently rolling hills cultivated over hundreds of years, not 1,000-foot rises into ancient untamed forests. Edward closed his eyes for a moment, probably relieved that I hadn't plummeted to my death. His lopsided grin appeared.
"You're right."
After patting myself all over, removing a thorn from my palm, and flexing my muscles, I stood on the limestone outcropping. My leg shook, and I didn't want to slide further down the escarpment, so I plopped on a sturdy rock. "I'm not hurt," I hollered at him. My ledge extended about 5 yards from the trail. Even if Edward dangled half his body over the edge, and I stretched my full 5 feet 9 inches, I wouldn't be able to grab hold of him. But I am stuck. I pulled my phone out and checked for a connection. Nothing. But maybe it was because I was on an international plan. "Do you have service?" His head disappeared out of view for a moment, then returned, shaking.
"No bars. We passed a farmhouse." He waved a hand over his shoulder. "I'll pop back there."
I thought of ranchers in Arizona who answered their doors armed with shotguns. Worried, I asked, "The owners won't try to scare you off their property?"
Edward tilted his head. "Course not. I've got my warrant card." He searched my expression. "Would you rather I stay? I'm sure someone will be by shortly."
Concern for me, not for rifle-wielding farmers. No one had passed us along the Cotswold Way since we began our hike from Birdlip to Painswick that morning. A train from Bath, my temporary home during my internship, to Stroud, followed by a taxi to the trailhead. Our driver was the last person we encountered. Surrounded by thick bramble, beech trees, and an enormous pig snuffling through the dirt hundreds of feet below me, I was in a lovely location, relatively speaking. "I'll be okay. I've been trapped in worse places." Edward's face clouded over at the mention of my entombment, but I figured the more I talked about it, the less scarring it would be. "Besides," I waved toward the faraway enclosure, "I have a pig for company." Rather than celebrating my news, Edward's expression turned even more distressed. Anxiety in Edward presented itself as a tiny crease between his brows. "What?" I demanded. He stabbed a finger at the animal.
"Be careful, please. If you fell in there."
Shaking his head, he didn't finish his thought. The pig lifted a snout toward us with a snort. "He's cute," I insisted. Larger than any I'd seen at the county fairs of my childhood, and colored with gray patches on pink skin, he looked like a cartoon. "I'm naming him Patchy.
Patchy, Edward sighed faintly. You're a mad one, lass. He puffed out his cheeks. You're sure? I'm sure. I don't want to be here all day. Any rope will do the trick. Do you need a flapjack? The incongruity of the question threw me. How do you have flapjacks? He dug something out of his pocket and showed it to me, a square plastic packet. Extending his arm over the ledge, he dropped it on me. Crinkly wrapping covered what looked like a granola bar. After opening it, I confirmed it. This is a granola bar. Right, flapjack. Recognizing his stalling technique, I did not explain that flapjacks were pancakes. A rope? I gave him a thumbs up. Patchy will keep me company. Another. His head disappeared, followed by running footsteps thundering away. When he said soon, he meant it. Despite being stuck, I had a stunning view. The river Severing coiled far beyond green hills edged with hedges that cut the scenery into a patchwork. The cliff face's butter-colored limestone sprouted beechwood and more beguiling blackberry bushes. My stomach rumbled, the granola acting as an appetizer. Honestly, I asked it, you're the one who got me into this mess in the first place. I complained to my tummy. Another growl. Somehow I was under the impression that there would be a lot more pubs along the Cotswold Way. There are not, and I regretted my lack of preparation. Giving in, I carefully lifted the nearest vine, searching for food. I discovered wild hops, not berries. Not quite as helpful at the moment, but once I got off this ledge, a locally made ale and a warm pub was my next stop. Being in a country where the drinking age was 18 had its advantages, especially when dating a rule-crazy constable. The prospect of a cozy dinner made me more hungry. Fine, I'll forage, like a bear. I couldn't remember whether England had bears. Worryingly, one of the supporters of Bath's crest was a bear, which didn't bode well for a girl trapped in the woods. But, I reasoned out loud, the other supporter is a lion, and I know England doesn't have those. Scooting as far from the edge as possible, I pressed my shoulders against the cliff face and wiggled toward the blackberry bush that had lured me here. The fruits were smallish, each tiny pearl plump and inviting. Secure in my seating, I tugged on branches and plucked berries, popping them into my mouth. The subtle sweetness exploded with every bite, trickling down my throat. I needed more. One particularly thick bramble held fruity promise, but I couldn't tell if the ledge extended underneath it. I pulled back a curtain of leaves and was hit with an odd smell. As I dropped the branches, something blue on an ivory background caught my eye. Holding my breath, I moved the bush aside. Sunshine poked through a cloud, flooding the area and allowing the image to resolve. A unicorn head with a knife in its teeth. I shuddered, struggling to see what surface the sinister image was painted on. Leaning forward to see it better, my hand settled onto something cold and pliable. The dappled sunlight camouflaged something much larger than a creepy drawing. Scrambling backward, a branch caught hold of my shirt, and I pitched sideways. Loose gravel gave way, and I slipped further down the escarpment. My hands flew out to find purchase, landing on dead flesh. The body shifted, revealing a girl a little older than me. Horrified, I grasped a vine and pulled myself back onto the relative safety of my rock. The young woman was naked, except for the tattoo penned into the side of her torso. Under it, a fresh gash, made with surgical precision, crudely stitched, curving from her back down and around to the front. A deep sadness welled up in me, mingling with horror. "I'll get help," I promised her, knowing with a sick lurch that I was too late. Dizzy, with tears